Today we have a mostly confirmed date for seasonal, as well as some extra information about how the progression is going to go down in this new phase for Tarkov. So we'll go through all of that right now, starting with the date. So today, Nikita posted this kind of cryptic BSG production calendar, which will pop up on the screen. It doesn't really tell us anything. And about 2 hours later, he posted this saying, sorry, it will be a slight delay for the first season start. The planned date is going to be the 3rd of August. So from today, right now as of the time of recording, this is the 27th, Monday, the 27th of July. So the 3rd equates to basically a week from now. So it's going to be in 7 days time. Hopefully we'll be getting the start of seasonal. Note here that he does say planned date, by the way, so technically speaking things could still change at this stage, but hopefully if all goes to plan, then we'll be seeing seasonal drop in 1 week's time from now. Prior to putting this out, he actually was writing back to some initial posts as well. So Very Bad Scav said to him, does this mean more delay on the original calendar? And he said, unfortunately, we'll be working next weekend to make it ready as soon as possible. So they're going to be crunching through the weekend this week, Saturday, Sunday. So hopefully it does come out on that Monday for their sake. Otherwise, maybe we'll see a couple more days delay. But basically, we're not going to get it until next Monday. So if you're worrying about taking time off this week, then you don't need to. The other part to that is that for Blackout, which is the event that's currently running at the moment, that was due to expire today, but that has also been extended, and there's actually no date on that. That's been extended indefinitely, presumably until they're ready to release seasonal. So on here it says Blackout Division's operation in the lab continues. Despite the extreme danger, mechanics work continues to drag on. The in-game event has been extended, and its end date will be announced separately. Complete the associated tasks to earn a unique achievement. So you've got a little bit more time to go and complete Blackout if that's something that either you haven't started because you couldn't be bothered, or you were busy, or didn't quite manage to make it to the end. You got a little bit more time. I would say, having actually now finished the Blackout event, I actually didn't think it was as hard as people made it out to be. Maybe that's just because I have a little bit more experience in labs. I'm definitely not a labs chad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think maybe the event has calmed down a little bit, and some of the changes that they put in place previously have helped a lot. I found when I was playing that I actually didn't really fight that many PMCs because most people are tied up fighting against Black Division, and typically, like any Tarkov map, you're more likely to play against other players at the beginning. And if you do take it kind of carefully, methodically, and slowly, then most of the time, at least I found that I was probably the last player on the map, and it's just you fighting against the AI. And one thing I did like about Blackout was that the AI is a little bit less formulaic because it's on labs rather than being on Icebreaker, which is all good fun, but the layout is exactly the same and the number of enemies is exactly the same throughout Icebreaker, so it's very, very formulaic, whereas the labs one is a little bit more dynamic. And they're not impossible. I actually do think the Black Division AI on labs is a little bit easier than on Icebreaker. So if you haven't jumped in and you're a little bit worried or a bit hesitant to go and play labs at night against the hardest AI in the game, I think you should probably go give it a try, because I was actually pleasantly surprised after thinking, God, this is really not my kind of event. I was pleasantly surprised that it was more fun than I thought it was going to be going into it. Alongside this, we've actually had a little bit more of a tease about the progression system, mainly on items and how they interact with the trader levels and things like quest unlocks from this post that they put out today as well. One of the changes coming in update 1.1 for Escape from Tarkov is a rework of the side task system. The vast majority of the tasks will no longer be organized into chains, where each new task unlocks only after completing the previous one. Instead, they'll be tied to trader loyalty levels. At level 1 with a trader, a set of basic tasks will be available. To advance to level 2, you will need to complete several of them. Each new level will unlock a new set of increasingly more challenging tasks. The rewards for these tasks will be more focused on cash, unlike the current system, where a significant portion of the payout consists of barter items and equipment. This is quite a big change from what we've seen previously, because a lot of items are connected to the task system at the moment. But let's continue on. Most trade offers will become available immediately upon reaching a new level with a trader without being tied to a specific task. For example, the Trizit backpack will unlock a Ragman 3 and the DevTac Ronin helmet a mechanic level 2. Some tasks will remain exceptions to this new system and will continue to unlock in chains regardless of trader levels. Rewards for these tasks will include especially rare trade offers or crafts. So this is a big departure. I think it's going to depend on exactly what they put where in terms of the traders as to how this will function. They say here, especially rare things. I don't know whether that's going to include stuff like the Corund plate at Prepper level 3, because one of the reasons why that was kind of hard to get to and early was because it was behind the reconnaissance task on Lighthouse. So if that's removed, then that's sort of going to invalidate like all the class 4 armor in the game up until that stage. Although it was annoying having to complete individual tasks and individual missions to get unlocked for certain things, you could kind of tailor what you wanted by which path you went down. And if the task was kind of annoying, then it was unfortunate if you wanted a particular piece of equipment. The current plate stands out because you have to go and play a whole bunch of Lighthouse to go and get it. But the issue now is that if you just carry on and get to Prapor level 3, assuming the plate is there straight away, then you don't really need to buy class 4 armor anymore. So it did give BSG some more levers to put things behind, not necessarily a trader level. The way you could kind of think of it as like a trader level and a half. Like Prapor level 3 didn't have the grunt plate, but it did after you did recon. So maybe it was kind of like trader level 3.4 or something, because you had to complete some tasks as well. Something like that. It gave a bit more flexibility for BSG to balance some of these items that are a bit too powerful for trader level 3 on its own, but not quite powerful enough for trader level 4 because it's surpassed by the equipment on that trader level. So this flattening of progression, it may actually just invalidate a lot of items where it suddenly becomes unlocked on trader level 3, and then you don't really need to use anything else within that particular category. So let's see how this goes. It really depends, as always with Tarkov. The devil's in the detail and how they actually execute it and what is pinned under what category, but it might just mean that the progression is just a little bit easier to get good stuff, and you might end up seeing lots of people with the same builds. Not necessarily a huge problem, but you might see a little bit less variety, or there might just be less choice in terms of the linearity of going through the traders and the quest progression. You don't really have to pick, you can kind of get everything just by going through the normal quests and getting trader unlocks like we usually do. The one part that is quite nice is the end of this, where they say the key rewards from such task chains will be displayed as soon as you accept the first task. This will allow players to see in advance what they will ultimately earn. This just means you don't have to go to the wiki to decide which ones you're going to do. The main goal of these changes is to make progression less linear and less dependent on specific tasks, providing more ways to gain access to useful items. So that's the goal. We'll see whether that actually pans out. I do like the idea of being able to see like the key item that you're going to get at the end of a task line before you go down the whole route, because it helps you to make the decision and makes your gameplay a bit more meaningful. So if they do it in the right way, this could be cool. If not, it's going to make it a little bit more boring and everyone's build's going to be the same. So it really depends how they do it, and we'll just have to see when seasonal launches in a week's time. I think at this point it is actually worth recapping the seasonal system itself, because I've not been streaming a great deal, but every time I do, I still have people coming in asking questions that have been answered quite a while ago. And so I'm sure there's some people here who are still a bit confused about what seasonal has to offer, why it's different from a usual wipe, and what is exactly coming. So the one main thing that I would say about this wipe is that it is kind of unique, is that it's the only wipe that we've ever had where there is actually not going to be a wipe. And by that, I mean currently on your account, you have a PvP permanent account, which is the character that we're playing right now, and that happened from 1.0, and that account is never going to wipe ever again. Most people will have a PvE account too, if you're on EOD or you're on Unheard, or if you're on Standard and you bought PvE as well, and that also will never wipe. So currently we've got 2 possible accounts, and also you've got Arena linked to both of them. Then with this new season, this is going to be a unique patch or update, I would say, because we're going to get a new seasonal account entirely, and that's going to act a bit like PvP permanent or PvE permanent, because you have to wipe PvE on its own. And so you're going to get a third account that you're going to be able to swap between. And so when seasonal does actually launch, you're basically then going to have 2 PvP accounts, one that does wipe and one that doesn't wipe. For every season after this, so season 2 for example, when that comes about, the seasonal account that you've been playing on from a week's time for 6 months or so, that will wipe. Whether things will transfer across to your permanent account remains to be seen, but from then on, it will effectively act as a wipe of the seasonal account. So the season 1 is a bit of a special case, because currently we don't have that account and we will just be given an account. So it's the only time we get one of these big 6-monthly updates where nothing is actually wiping and we're just being handed a new character to play on, because there's nothing to wipe because the old PvP account is staying permanent. Now, one of the other questions that I see coming up over and over and over again was matchmaking, and I think this is because it has some implications for the PvP permanent account, and there was a lot of speculation at some point, maybe 3-4 months ago, about how this was going to work. But Nikita has confirmed that seasonal accounts will not be match made with permanent accounts, and that's probably going to be the case immediately when this actually launches in the first place. Whether they change that later down the line because there's not enough people on PvP permanent, for example, or whether the PvP seasonal player base dies down, I think we're just going to have to wait and see what happens with that. So I wouldn't expect any decisions outside of what we know already until about 4 or 5 months into this seasonal patch, or whatever you want to call it. But for the time being, at least, when this launches, seasonal is going to be on its own servers effectively for matchmaking, and PvP permanent will be on its own servers. So the 2 characters will never mix. You'll never be able to fight your friend on PvP Permanent when you're playing PvP Seasonal, and I imagine that you won't even be able to team up with people between those two different servers either, because that just wouldn't make any sense. And one of the main rationales for this in the past was that on Seasonal, they want to have these unique scenarios. So for example, there's areas of the map that are maybe irradiated, or there's this bad weather, there's like storms all the time, or maybe it's, who knows, maybe they put snow back in at some random point or whatever. And those events don't really make sense if you're being queued into PvP Permanent, which is going to be like the vanilla version of the game, where nothing's going on outside of maybe regular events that come from time to time where bosses on different maps. So if one person is stood in a radiation zone on Seasonal, and then there's no radiation zone on PvP Permanent, it just doesn't really make any sense. The only way that you could really do this is by letting people get through the wipe up until about 4 months, or Seasonal, I should say. So used to calling it the wipe. Let people go through Seasonal for 4 months or 5 months or something, and then you clear off the things that are going to interfere and combine them back together. But you can see how for BSG, this would actually be probably quite technically challenging and may cause issues, which is the reason probably why they don't want to do it, because it doesn't really make much sense to link these two accounts back together. So this does cause people to worry about what the player base is going to be like on PvP Permanent. And I don't know if it's really going to be that much of an issue. Like, yes, you may struggle to find PMCs. That probably is an issue that you might have. However, with the new matchmaking system that they've got, you do load into raids much, much quicker. And even if there's a lower player base, there probably will still be some PMCs roaming around over there as well. Things they could do if it gets really bad, technically speaking, is to combine the 2 times together, so you can't choose what time you're going in at. So it'll just be 1 time for both servers. Because if you think right now, there's a lot of fragmentation. We have all the different maps, and we have 2 different times for all of those maps as well. Then we're going to have PvP Seasonal and PvP Permanent with all those different maps and times. You've got some people playing PvE, you've got some people playing Arena. So the fragmentation of the player base is going to be a thing, but with the new matchmaking, you should at least be able to find a raid on PvP Permanent. And even if the player base is quite diminished in terms of the number of PMCs actually playing, you should at least be able to play. And in some ways, I think for players who are on that side of the game modes, they're not playing Seasonal, or they've just gone back to PvP Permanent for a bit, it'll probably be less intensive for those particular raids. So even if you get thrown into a raid in 3 or 4 minutes, there might be less actual players in that raid, but that might make it a slightly easier experience for players who don't want the the hardcore full grind of Seasonal, and they want to have a bit more of a chill time but still be progressing in PvP. So again, we'll have to see how it pans out. Maybe it'll be an issue if you're trying still to get Kappa over on PvP Permanent. Then you need to do some player killing quests, you just can't find anybody. Maybe that'll be a problem, but it's something that BSG, I imagine, are probably going to cross that bridge when they get to it, as opposed to try to remedy that now before we know what it's going to look like. And you might see people play Seasonal for a month and then migrate back to PvP Permanent, so maybe it won't end up being an issue after all. Speaking of, I did cover this in a previous update, but for those who didn't see this, there was another task change update here about Kappa as well. So there's a whole new set of unlock requirements for Kappa. You basically need to get to Loyalty Traders level 4, Character level 40, Chemical Part 4, Shooter Born in Heaven, Tarkov Shooter Part 4, and Sew It Good Part 4. So it's much easier to get Kappa now, or at least it will be in Seasonal when this drops, than it was previously. So you don't need to sweat it as much, try to go through every single mission. You only need to do that if you want to complete everything. And I don't know whether there's going to be a new achievement for completing all the missions, or maybe there's going to be a new quest reward for doing kind of something similar to the old Kappa. We don't know yet. But for Kappa itself, to get the bigger container, it's actually going to be pretty easy. It's going to be effectively max traders with a few extra missions in there. And this is very interesting as to how it's going to allude to some of the new progression flows. Like, we know that they're going to make it flatter. We just talked about it for the items and for the trader levels themselves. But we also saw previously that there's going to be changes to ammo as well. Like, we saw that T45M, which is 28 penetration, that's going to be on Prapor level 1 now, in this new kind of easier progression system. So Seasonal itself might be quite a bit faster to progress through than it was previously. And in here also, we knew that there's going to be lower trader requirements. So it said that the character level requirements for the earlier trade levels will be reduced. And so the fact that on Kappa you've got max traders as a requirement and also level 40 as a requirement. As a reminder, right now, Ragman is the highest trader level that you need to get to, which is currently 42, and Mechanic is at level 40. And so this is not guaranteed, but the implication there is that max traders might actually be lower than level 40 now, given that it's specifically a requirement for Kappa, because otherwise the level 40 requirement wouldn't be needed within this particular list, because getting to max traders already gets you to level 42 currently. So who knows, maybe we'll end up with level 38 being Ragman or something. It looks like they're going to reduce those trader levels. So there's no trader money spend anymore. The only thing you need is to do tasks so you can get the trader rep up, and also your own character level to get to the next trader. So it's going to be simplified and streamlined in that way as well. The final part to recap here was about the global modifiers. I did a big deep dive into all of this, but just as a quick summary, we've got 3 sections: global modifiers, which apply to everybody on seasonal. This only applies to seasonal and won't apply to PvP permanent or to PvE. This also only applies to your actual PMC as well. So if you're playing Scav over on seasonal, these won't affect that either. So the global modifiers are going to be no insurance, Black Division are going to be on certain maps, no fanning raid for the hideout, big boost, so you'll just be able to buy your way through the hideout itself. We also know the hideout is flatter as well, based on what they said, less requirements, so it might be easier. It's a lot more, it's kind of a ruble season in some ways. Armor shortage, so that means that you're really going to struggle to actually get armor. Maybe it's Ragman in particular that's going to have a shortage of armor, or maybe the scavs out in the world are not going to have as much. Either way, that with the boosted ammo on early level traders are going to mean that weapons are more powerful than armor in this particular season, this particular wipe right at the beginning. You have crafting level 51 right at the beginning of this season, which means you're able to craft this stuff really quickly, and B, craft 2 things at the same time, as well as item crafting being reduced by 50%. So the hideout is going to be really, really important, and your character gains 25% more raid experience. Now, in terms of the positive and negative perks, you can technically just click through and not take any of them, because the rules are that you need to have more than 0 points. Picking a negative perk, something that disadvantages you, gives you points, and picking something positive gives you negative points. So if you pick something good, you'll have less than 0, so you need to pick something negative to get you back up above 0 to give you points basically to spend on it. But if you don't want to interact with that system at all, you don't have to, and you could just click straight through and start your season with the global modifiers. That said, I think there are a few that are really, really good. Marathon Runner, where your stamina is consumed 15% slower because of the way that kind of stims work in SJ6 and stuff. I think that that's going to be really, really decent. Hercules, where you strength and endurance start at level 15. This is really going to help that early first couple of weeks where your PMC is huffing and puffing around, and jump you up to a decent level to start with right at the beginning of this season. And then also Sprinter, which I think is more necessary for more experienced players, to be honest. Maybe casuals can not get that if they don't want to, but running speed increased by 5%. Can't really get running speed from much else, particularly outside of stims and skills. So to have that as a flat bonus throughout the whole wipe for only 2 points, I think is actually pretty good. The one that for casual people who aren't going to play the whole wipe, average is definitely decent. For 10 skill points, you've got all character skills start at level 25, but cannot be increased any further. If typically you don't get your skills above level 25 in the first place, then this is basically a no-brainer. Now on the negative side, I actually don't think that they're that bad. A lot of these are relatively fair, I would say, and I don't think are going to have a massive effect. So haemophilia, for example, a bleed chance increased by 25%. Bleeding is annoying, but you can fix it with cheap items, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. Osteoporosis, again, limb fracture is annoying, but it doesn't matter that much. You can override it with painkillers anyway. And falling from heights, I mean, you don't tend to do that much damage to yourself falling from heights anyway, so 15% is really not that big a deal. Imagine you deal 50 damage to your PMC. Well, now you're going to be taking 57 damage or something. It's really not that big of a deal. So I think these two are potentially ones that you could take. Same thing with the medkit uses, consuming 25% more. It's just a rubles thing. Might have to take a bit more meds in with you, but I don't think it matters too much. And then allergic, which I'm going to take. It's a bit of a gamble. Become allergic to 2 random items from the provisions or medication category. But BSG have basically confirmed that this is going to be exclusive of medkits and serve kits. So no CMS, no serve 12. Salewers, car kits, AI2s, IFACs, any of that are not going to be in it. So it's going to mostly be stims and food. And there's a lot of items in that category. There's about 80. So hitting on something that's really important is unlikely. Would suck if you ended up getting stuck with mule, you being allergic to mule or something. But you could technically do Abdol plus 2 plus Propitol. Like there's usually ways around most of these other things. Again, it would be annoying to get stuck with a Propitol allergy. And Nikita has confirmed with this that we won't know what we're allergic to when you pick that straight away. You'll have to just experiment and test in raid, but it's not going to insta-kill you. You'll get hands shaking and then you'll take damage, but it won't insta-kill you. So I think for 3 points, I think this is actually pretty fair. And could be kind of interesting to try and like figure out exactly what it is that you've got the downside for. Third leg, this is a free point. Movement speed is decreased by 1%, which you're really not going to notice, and probably offsets with the sprinter anyway. And then buying items at Therapist is 5% cheaper. I actually don't really care about what third leg actually does. That could just do nothing and just give me +1 so that I can spend it somewhere else up here. And the only other one in the personal positives that I'm tempted to take just to see what happens is the street tax, which costs 1. Once per week, some scavs pay you protection money. So if you did want to do the simplest thing possible, you could literally take third leg and then use that to pay for street tax, because it's like hardly any downside for some random unknown upside, which could end up being quite cool. Outside of that, you can give yourself a hardcore experience if you want to have broken secure container and no flea market and stuff like that. But I don't think for anybody who's serious about progression, these things are giving you more negative than they're worth. You can't really take anything up here that offsets the negative nature of like no flea, for example. That is so dramatic and really changes your wipe. So it's just something to be able to put some extra rules on yourself if you want to do it. It's not something I'd pick if I was actually trying to min-max my build, my skill build, and do it in a good way to get an advantage for myself in this particular wipe. So those negatives give you 11 points. That's hemophilia, osteoporosis, well that hurt, and allergic with third leg. And up here, if you want to take the ones that I think are good ones, marathon runner, Hercules, and sprinter, this is only 8. So you've got something to play with. You could basically lose one of these out of the build, and you don't need to deal with that. If you're choosing average, obviously you need a few more points there. One, if you do actually want to get some extra things up here for whatever reason, then maybe you want to choose personality vacuum. They've confirmed that this doesn't affect any of the quests later on in the wipe, and if it turns out that it does affect something, I imagine they'll probably patch it, so it's probably relatively safe to take from a meta progression perspective. So it just depends on whether you want to have your items costing 20% more, which I think is like quite a big nerf for 2 points, but if you do need a few more, I think it's relatively safe. You can always make more money, you can run another scav run, and then that kind of offsets the cost. And you're probably going to be buying a lot of stuff on the fleet anyway this wipe, given that you can put stuff on the fleet for the hideout. So it doesn't matter as much. You will be able to make a lot more money through the flea market for hideout items that you find in raid, and then you can sell. So if you did want to do that, then that's potentially an option. So there you have it, roughly 1 week to go until the seasonal patch hits. Hopefully it'll be next Monday on the 3rd. If not, then it might be delayed by a few days or maybe up to a week, but we'll just have to monitor it, see how it goes. And if it does get delayed, I'll probably make another video telling everybody about it. So until then, I wish you the best of luck in the season when it comes through. As always, a big shout out to all my patrons. And as usual, have fun in your raids.